The day that business empire fell began with a simple misunderstanding. A powerful female CEO from a leading cybersecurity firm walked into the lobby of a potential partner's headquarters dressed in quietly elegant attire. No bodyguards, no fanfare. The receptionist glanced at her skin tone and her unassuming outfit, then dismissed her as if she didn't belong. "Deliveries go around back," the receptionist sneered, voice dripping with contempt, as a security guard lunged forward and gripped the CEO's arm. Standing just nearby, the vice president recognized her instantly, but chose to remain silent, allowing the humiliating scene to play out. Escorted from the building, the CEO's face remained composed, betraying no reaction. But beneath that calm exterior, her plan of silent retribution had already begun. That very afternoon, her company's stock started to plummet. Within weeks, the once proud conglomerate declared bankruptcy. She didn't believe in revenge, she believed in consequences. Monday morning dawned like any other at Brightwell Enterprises, New York's premier cybersecurity powerhouse. Early light streamed through the expansive glass walls, dancing off the polished marble floors and casting a glow over the cavernous lobby. Amid the weekday rush, sharply dressed professionals hurried through the doors, each exuding the quiet confidence of the accomplished. Through that crowd emerged a woman in simple, understated black trousers and a soft gray cashmere sweater. Olivia Harris, CEO of Harris Innovations, a billion-dollar cybersecurity titan, had arrived alone. She left her usual entourage behind. Today, she wanted to experience Brightwell as an ordinary visitor, to feel its culture firsthand before putting pen to paper on a critical partnership agreement. With no flashy jewelry or designer logos to announce her status, Olivia stood out only by the quiet authority in her posture and the keen intelligence in her eyes, honed over thousands of high-stakes meetings and billion-dollar deals. She approached the reception desk at the center of the grand hall, the very spot where every partner or client first encounters Brightwell's ethos. Silently, she took in every detail, the guard's wary stare, the way the receptionists greeted well-heeled guests, even the meticulous way paperwork was organized on the desk. As Olivia drew nearer, Rachel Bennett, the receptionist, absorbed in her phone, looked up. Her eyes flicked over Olivia in a flash of surprise that immediately hardened into skepticism. In Rachel's mind, this plainly dressed woman could not possibly be anyone of consequence. An unusual hush fell over the lobby as Olivia paused, offering a polite smile and waiting for Rachel to look up again. No one realized that this very moment would set in motion a chain of events destined to alter the fates of both women and change Brightwell Enterprises forever. Rachel Bennett kept her eyes glued to her phone, scrolling through the screen as if deliberately prolonging the awkward silence between the two women. When she could no longer ignore her guest, she finally looked up, her face registering obvious displeasure. Rachel was the kind of woman who frequently earned compliments, youthful, beautiful, with softly curled blonde hair and meticulously manicured nails. Yet, all that polished presentation couldn't mask the cold, haughty look in her eyes, a confidence born of her petty authority as a receptionist at a major corporation. She let her icy blue gaze sweep over Olivia without concealment. At first, it was a routine once over, but within seconds, when she noticed Olivia's too simple outfit, bare face, and especially her brown skin, that look transformed into outright disdain. Crossing her arms, Rachel's red lips curled into a mocking, provocative smile. "Deliveries go around back. This area isn't for you," she announced, her voice echoing through the hushed lobby. A few nearby employees turned, curiosity and amusement flickering on their faces. Some whispered to one another, treating this scene like an impromptu spectacle on a dull Monday morning. Clearly, Rachel was savoring the moment, a rare chance to wield her small power over someone she presumed had nothing to fear. Unfazed, Olivia offered a calm, patient smile. Her voice was steady, clear, and carried an unexpected confidence in the face of such disrespect. "I have an appointment with Mr. Richard Lawson at 9 o'clock. For a split second, doubt flickered in Rachel's eyes. Then she quickly reverted to scorn, as though Olivia's composure were laughable. She sneered, shaking her head in disbelief. "There's no appointment. Please leave before I call security." Each word rang out slowly and loudly, declaring her absolute dominance at the front desk. Rachel didn't even bother to check her schedule. In her mind, no woman like this could possibly be meeting with a company CEO. That conviction, rooted in deep-seated prejudice, felt rock solid to her. Around Olivia, more onlookers paused their work, as if bracing for some dramatic showdown. Olivia remained perfectly still, her composure unbroken, though her eyes grew sharper, as if she were committing every detail of this moment to memory. Rachel arched an eyebrow challengingly, radiating smug satisfaction. To her, the little power play was over. What Rachel didn't realize was that the real game was only just beginning, and the price of her prejudice would prove far higher than she ever imagined. Olivia kept her gaze steady on Rachel as she slowly reached into her sweater pocket for her phone. What seemed like an everyday gesture suddenly became the spark that pushed the situation to its breaking point. In an instant, Rachel's mocking smile vanished, replaced by a hardened, challenging glare. Before Olivia could even free her phone, Rachel sprang to her feet, her voice shrill as it shattered the lobby's uneasy quiet. "Security! There's someone causing a disturbance here!" That cry rang out like an alarm bell, freezing every movement in the grand hall. Conversations died mid-sentence, hurried footsteps halted, and every pair of eyes turned toward Olivia. An oppressive hush settled over the space, amplifying everyone's sense of dread. Two uniformed guards appeared at once, striding forward with practiced efficiency and unreadable expressions. Without question or hesitation, they grabbed Olivia's wrists with bruising force. Her phone clattered onto the marble floor, the sharp crack echoing through the lobby and snapping people to attention. Olivia didn't struggle or panic. Her composure was astonishingly calm. Yet behind those unflinching eyes flickered a flash of hurt, not from the pain in her wrists, but from the public humiliation unfolding around her. Meanwhile, Rachel stood with her arms crossed, clearly savoring every moment. To Rachel, this wasn't just a matter of removing a troublemaker. It was a power play, a chance to reaffirm her authority before her colleagues. She swept a glance over the onlookers as if to say, "See who's in charge here." A few nearby Brightwell employees whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disgust, but no one intervened. None of them knew who Olivia Harris really was, or what was really at stake. To the guards holding Olivia down, it was just another routine duty, removing someone they believed didn't belong at Brightwell. Rachel leaned in, lowering her voice so only Olivia could hear. "I told you, you don't belong here. Maybe next time you'll remember that." She gave a faint, triumphant smile, though her eyes betrayed pure contempt. Rachel had no idea, nor did she care, that she had just made an irreparable mistake. Olivia lifted her chin and shot Rachel one last icy, knowing look. She said nothing, only curved her lips into a slight, meaningful smile. Only Olivia understood that today's public insult would mark the beginning of a reckoning for both Brightwell and for Rachel herself. But, with her wrists pinned and Rachel's scornful gaze locked on her, No one in that lobby could have guessed how dearly they would pay for their prejudice. Just as Olivia was about to be hauled toward the exit, the soft chime of the elevator cut through the tension hanging over the lobby. The doors slid open to reveal Jonathan Reed, Brightwell's executive vice president, stepping out with commanding presence. He carried a refined leather briefcase and wore a bespoke suit tailored to perfection. Jonathan always presented himself with courteous, polished manners, yet an unmistakable chill. His temples were flecked with silver, and his steel-blue eyes assessed everything with the precision of a predator accustomed to controlling uncomfortable situations. To Brightwell's staff, he embodied the company's unseen power, the man whose influence shaped every major corporate decision. Within a heartbeat of exiting the elevator, Jonathan's sharp gaze locked onto Olivia. His expression flickered, betraying a flash of alarm as he took in her calm, composed face amid the rough grip of the two guards. But he said nothing and took no action. Instead, he chose to stand back and watch. His look shifted from concern to something far colder, a calculating, evaluative stare. This was not the eye of a bystander witnessing injustice. It was the eye of someone fully aware of the stakes, deliberately letting the scene unfold. Jonathan observed silently for a moment, then turned toward Rachel with a slight, deliberate nod, and a faint, inscrutable smile touched his lips. Rachel returned the gesture with palpable satisfaction and pride. Though subtle, Olivia caught it, enough to know that this was not merely Rachel's personal mistake, but part of a prejudice-baked corporate culture condoned by Brightwell's highest ranks. As Jonathan turned away, that sly smile on his face was more than silent complicity. It was a covert signal to the guards to carry on, proof that he knew precisely who Olivia was and the importance of her appointment, yet chose silence to protect his own interests and reinforce Brightwell's hidden power structure. Olivia met Jonathan's eyes for an instant, a moment so brief it barely registered, yet long enough for her to grasp the full reality. Rachel's contempt was not an isolated incident, but the outcome of a system steeped in discrimination, tacitly approved and even encouraged by senior leaders like Jonathan. A murky disappointment and sorrow welled up in Olivia, not for the personal affront she endured, but because she realized any multi-billion-dollar deal now meant nothing. She had placed great hope in Brightwell, but in that single calculating glance from Jonathan, she understood it had all gone too far. And more than anyone, Olivia knew this: the true danger lay with those who stood silently complicit, like Jonathan, for they were the architects and sustainers of the toxic culture that threatened to consume a great company like Brightwell. The moment Jonathan's cold gaze left Olivia, Rachel drew renewed strength from his silent complicity. She stepped closer with unmistakable confidence, her stiletto heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor as if she were savoring each triumphant step. In Rachel's mind, she was firmly in control, and that only fueled her pride. Before Olivia could be escorted out, Rachel leaned in, letting her golden hair cascade over one shoulder. She whispered in Olivia's ear, her breath icy and merciless. "Next time you want to pretend you're rich, dress the part. This isn't a charity for the poor." Rachel's low voice cut deep, each word a blade against Olivia's dignity. For Rachel, this was no longer just routine receptionist duty. It was her moment to unleash all the resentment she'd harbored under the polished facade. She had spent years serving those she both admired and envied, and today, Olivia had become the perfect target for her small but satisfying display of power. Olivia didn't respond immediately, but her calm, controlled eyes flashed with a terrifying chill. It wasn't ordinary anger, it was a fierce, unwavering resolve. She chose silence over retort, knowing that her quiet composure would speak louder than any words. Around them, the crowd of Brightwell employees stood motionless. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others masked curiosity with thinly veiled excitement. No one dared intervene. Their silence wasn't just passive. It was the starkest proof of the toxic culture poisoning this corporation. Rachel straightened, casting one last triumphant glance at Olivia before stepping back. She watched with satisfaction as the guards hauled Olivia toward the exit, as though she were applauding her own successful performance. But Rachel didn't realize that her final public insult had shattered Olivia's last limit of tolerance. For Olivia, this wasn't merely a personal slight. It was the emblem of every prejudice and contempt entrenched in Brightwell's culture. She was wounded, yes, but more importantly, she understood that this would not go unaddressed. As the glass doors slid shut behind her, the soft March sunlight bathed Olivia's face with an unexpected serenity. She smoothed the rumpled sleeve of her sweater and bent to pick up her fallen phone. She didn't look back or say another word. Yet, in the calm depth of her eyes, a rock-solid determination had crystallized. Rachel remained on the other side of the glass, watching with smug satisfaction, unaware that she had just planted a seed, and that seed would soon grow into a storm powerful enough to sweep away everything Rachel had ever relied on. The moment the heavy glass doors of Brightwell Enterprises closed gently behind Olivia, she paused for a beat in the soft New York morning light. She exhaled slowly, not from fatigue, but as a quiet brace for what was to come. Olivia glanced down at her phone, still in hand. Its screen nicked from the fall earlier, but that hardly mattered now. Inside, beyond the transparent glass, Rachel still stood with arms crossed, radiating smug pride as she exchanged satisfied smiles with nearby colleagues. They watched Olivia as if enjoying an entertaining performance, oblivious to the serious consequences headed their way. Olivia tapped her trusted assistant's number. The call connected almost instantly, and the familiar voice came through, ready to carry out any order. "Good morning, Miss Harris. What can I do for you?" Her reply was cool, composed, yet carried undeniable authority. "Activate Plan B immediately. Pull all investments and cancel every pending contract with Brightwell." Olivia paused, looking up at Brightwell's gleaming facade one last time. Once a symbol of wealth and power, now to her a monument to rot within. She continued, each word clipped with resolve. "Prepare a public statement explaining why we're ending the partnership. I want it as broad and as clear as possible." Her assistant hesitated briefly, ensuring there'd be no misunderstanding. "Ma'am, this will have major repercussions for Brightwell. Are you certain?" Olivia didn't hesitate. "I've never been more certain. We will not support a company that judges people by appearance or skin color." She ended the call with that calm but unwavering expression. This decision was more than personal vengeance. It was a stand against a prejudiced system, nurtured by the arrogance of the Rachels and the silent complicity of the Jonathans of the world. Back inside, Rachel was still basking in her small triumph. She returned to her post at the front desk, beaming as colleagues praised and admired her. To Rachel, this morning had been exceptional. She'd proven her little bit of power in front of everyone. What Rachel didn't realize was that in a single short phone call, she had unwittingly unleashed a storm that would sweep away everything she relied on. Olivia's final decision, backed by the immense power and influence of Harris Innovations, would soon plunge Brightwell Enterprises into an irreversible crisis. Outside, Olivia slipped her phone into her sweater pocket and walked away. The morning sun seemed to blaze even brighter, illuminating her determined face, serene yet razor-sharp. In mere minutes, Harris Innovations' public announcement would force Brightwell to face consequences beyond anything they'd ever imagined. And Olivia no longer cared whether Brightwell recognized its mistake. What she wanted was not a belated apology, but a fundamental change in a corporate culture steeped in injustice and prejudice, one that had endured far too long and harmed far too many. Just minutes after Olivia's fateful phone call, the lobby of Brightwell Enterprises was still steeped in that short-lived sense of triumph. Rachel casually settled back into her receptionist's chair, fingers flying over her phone's screen, her face alight with pride. Colleagues around her shot admiring, amused glances her way, none realizing that, at that very moment, Brightwell's fate was tipping irreversibly. Suddenly, Rachel's phone began to buzz relentlessly, new notifications stacking up, each alert chime more unnerving than the last. She frowned, irritation flickering as she looked down at the screen. Her smug smile evaporated in an instant. Headlines scrolled nonstop, each line as cold and cutting as a blade slicing into her dignity. Harris Innovations withdraws all funding and terminates partnership with Brightwell Enterprises following serious racial discrimination incident at headquarters. In a heartbeat, Rachel felt the floor give way beneath her. Her heart pounded, her face drained of color, and her trembling fingers frantically swiped through the article. It laid out every detail of the confrontation with Olivia, exposing the receptionist's public humiliation in brutal clarity, and didn't hesitate to call out the silent complicity of Brightwell's senior leadership. Before Rachel could even catch her breath, her co-workers began receiving the same alerts. Phones rang out from every corner of the lobby. The excited chatter of moments before turned to anxious murmurs and outright panic on every face. Up on the top floor, Vice President Jonathan Reed had just entered his office when his assistant burst in, voice quivering with alarm. "Mr. Reed, Harris Innovations has just issued a public statement ending our partnership. The stock is plummeting." Jonathan froze, paling as he booted his computer. His hands shook uncontrollably as he pulled up the stock chart, Brightwell's share price diving almost vertically, the green numbers turning red with alarming speed. At the same time, in the executive conference room, CEO Richard Lawson sat paralyzed as his assistant slid across the breaking news. One by one, major partners were calling to cancel deals and withdraw investments. Each call a dagger to the career he'd spent decades building. In less than 30 minutes, the entire building had shifted from calm to chaos. Employees who'd silently witnessed Olivia's mistreatment now scrambled in fear for their own futures. Back at the reception desk, Rachel remained seated, pale and wide-eyed, unable to tear her gaze from the rolling alerts. Just minutes ago, she'd believed she was in complete control. Now she couldn't believe how quickly things had unraveled. She glanced toward the glass doors where Olivia had stood. Outside, the street lay empty and bathed in gentle sunlight, an idyllic scene at odds with the turmoil within. In that moment, Rachel realized her small act of prejudice and petty arrogance had triggered a cascade of consequences, an unstoppable domino effect that threatened to drag the entire company into an abyss. For the first time in her life, Rachel tasted true fear, not merely the fear of losing her job, but the fear of herself and the fallout of her unconscious contempt. It was a deep, icy dread, as she understood that her mistake could no longer be undone. Just as Rachel sat frozen, eyes glued to her phone in unprecedented fear, a sudden sound snapped her to attention. The elevator doors opening again, faster and more urgent than ever. Richard Lawson, Brightwell's commanding CEO, burst out of the elevator, his steps hurried and unsteady. His face was ashen, eyes wide with worry and confusion. Gone was his usual calm confidence. His tie dangled askew, his suit jacket gaped at 2 buttons, clear signs of his extreme panic. "Rachel!" Richard bellowed, his voice seething with anger and disappointment, reverberating through the lobby like a warning bell. Startled, Rachel scrambled to her feet, legs trembling so badly she could barely stand. In front of her colleagues, she shook uncontrollably, mouth opening, but no words emerging from her parched throat. Richard strode up, gaze razor-sharp yet tinged with despair, and addressed the entire staff in a booming voice. "What have you done, Rachel? Do you know who that was?" That was Olivia Harris, CEO of Harris Innovations. She's our only partner who can save us from bankruptcy. The lobby fell into a chilling silence. The curious and amused whispers from moments before vanished, replaced by pale faces and wide-eyed shock. No one had imagined that this single incident could trigger such a devastating fallout. Rachel stood statue still, her face drained of color, lips trembling violently. Richard's words hit her like an icy bucket of water, making it hard to breathe. All her earlier confidence and pride evaporated instantly. I didn't know," she stammered, voice weak and desperate. Richard cut her off without a second's mercy, clenching his jaw as he pointed a furious finger. "Didn't know? You're the receptionist. Your job is to know exactly who comes through these doors. You've just destroyed Brightwell's last chance to survive, Rachel." At that moment, Jonathan Reed, Brightwell's vice president, rushed down the stairs behind Richard. Seeing the chaos, Jonathan tried to remain composed and moved toward Richard, as if to calm him. But Richard spun on him, eyes icier and more severe than ever. "And you, Jonathan. I heard everything. You stood there knowing exactly who Olivia Harris is, and let this happen. Do you even realize what you've done?" Jonathan went pale, lips pressed into a tight line, unable to utter a word. For the first time in his career, he felt the hidden power he once wielded slip through his fingers. The situation had spiraled far beyond his control. Richard scanned the silent employees, his gaze shifting from anger to profound disappointment. "Do you think this is a joke? This is your future, the future of this company, the future of hundreds of families. Because of your prejudice and stupidity, you will all pay the price." With that, Richard turned and strode away, leaving Rachel and Jonathan rooted in shame and despair. Each heavy footstep echoed through the lobby like a final verdict on Brightwell's fate, now seemingly irreversible. Rachel remained motionless, eyes vacant, staring into nothingness. She felt more acutely than ever the full weight of her careless arrogance, a consequence not just of losing her job, but of profound failure and guilt. Everything she had once valued, her looks, her petty authority, her false pride, now meant nothing against the collapse of a major corporation. She realized that from this moment on, her life would never be the same. As Richard turned to leave, his fury still smoldering, his gaze fell on Jonathan's terrified face, and the tension reignited. Richard strode back, stopping in front of Jonathan, his voice sharp as a blade. "Jonathan, you recognized her and did nothing. You've sabotaged this company." Jonathan went pale, all trace of his usual calm authority gone. He staggered back as if struck, his self-esteem and honor shattered. Richard's icy stare pinned him in place, offering no escape. The entire lobby gathered around, witnessing this explosive confrontation. Whispers spread like wildfire, accusatory eyes fixed on Jonathan and Rachel. He knew exactly who she was and just let it happen? I can't believe he'd be capable of this. Jonathan tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. Deep wrinkles suddenly etched his forehead, and he looked decades older in mere minutes. At that moment, Richard's phone buzzed insistently, shattering the charged silence. He glanced at the screen, hands trembling as he opened the latest email. His eyes widened in horror as he read the terse, ruthless words from Olivia Harris's office. "We hereby terminate all negotiations. Good luck to Brightwell." Each word of that email hammered down Brightwell's fate. Richard stood frozen, disbelief etched on his face. He drew in a shuddering breath, but his throat tightened, the air feeling impossibly thick. Jonathan watched Richard's reaction and felt despair wash over him. He, accustomed to manipulating every outcome, now saw that his hidden power and alliances meant nothing. Richard lowered his phone, disappointment breaking his voice as he spoke. "Jonathan, you have destroyed this company. Everything we spent years building has vanished because you stayed silent to protect your own interests." Jonathan bowed his head. Never in his career had he been speechless. Brightwell's lobby felt more oppressive than ever. The employees surrounding them sensed the gravity of Jonathan's complicity in Rachel's actions. In the corner, Rachel stood like a ghost, her face ashen and eyes vacant. She never imagined her flippant words and disdainful glance could have such catastrophic consequences. She realized she had become the living symbol of prejudice and reckless arrogance, an indelible stain on her own life. Richard cast one last helpless look around, then shook his head and shuffled toward the elevator. He knew it was too late. Brightwell Enterprises, the empire he had painstakingly built over years, was collapsing before his eyes, a merciless reckoning for the contempt, complacency, and prejudice he and the senior leadership had permitted. The elevator doors closed with a cold finality, leaving the lobby in a deathly silence. No one spoke. Everyone understood that they would be haunted forever by this harsh lesson. When power is coupled with silent complicity and disrespect for human dignity, the consequences are unavoidable and devastating. Just after Richard stepped into the elevator, leaving behind the lobby's suffocating silence, phones across the building began to ring again, more urgently than ever. In the span of just 5 minutes, everything that had once seemed rock solid at Brightwell Enterprises collapsed like a sandcastle before a tidal wave. On the giant screen in the trading room, Brightwell's stock chart plunged in freefall, its bright red tumble a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Shares tumbled over 40%, a staggering drop that stunned investors and sent shockwaves of despair throughout the company. The chaos unfolded so rapidly that no one had time to react. Back in the lobby, Rachel hadn't yet regained her composure. Her legs shook uncontrollably as the HR director, a stern, middle-aged woman, approached with a crisp pair of scissors and a termination notice. Her voice cut through the din so everyone could hear. "Rachel Bennett, due to the severe consequences of your actions this morning, senior management has decided to terminate your employment immediately. You have 10 minutes to collect your belongings and leave the premises." Rachel staggered back as though struck. Colleagues who had showered her with praise only minutes earlier now turned away, avoiding her gaze as if she were contaminated. She felt utterly abandoned, consumed by a shame and loneliness more intense than anything she'd ever known. While Rachel stood trembling, Jonathan Reed received a call from the board of directors. His face went ashen and sweat beaded on his forehead. The call ended quickly but delivered a crushing blow. "Jonathan Reed, you are suspended effective immediately pending an internal investigation into today's incident." Jonathan froze, eyes staring blankly ahead. For the first time in his career, he felt completely powerless. All the backroom influence and secret alliances he'd cultivated over the years offered him no protection now. Outside Brightwell's doors, dozens of reporters and cameras had amassed, pressing in on the entrance. The media storm erupted. What does Brightwell have to say about this morning's racial discrimination scandal? Is Harris Innovations' withdrawal the death knell for Brightwell Enterprises? High above, in his lonely conference room, Richard Lawson sat slumped at the head of the table, face buried in his hands, shoulders trembling. Whether from anger or heartbreak, no one could tell. Every time his phone rang, it brought more bad news: canceled contracts, major investors pulling out, longtime partners severing ties. Richard knew there was no reversing this disaster. The company he'd spent decades building was fracturing because of one fleeting act of prejudice and irresponsibility by employees he'd trusted. He glanced up at the ticker on the wall, stocks ablaze in red, a relentless verdict on Brightwell's future. This was more than a financial crisis. It was the collapse of honor and trust, the very values he thought he'd been safeguarding. Down in the lobby, Rachel quietly packed her meager belongings: a coffee mug, a few framed photos, a small notebook filled with client compliments, tokens of a life that had evaporated in minutes. As she stepped out into the glare of camera flashes, head bowed, she understood that, from this moment on, her face and name would stand as the living symbol of corporate discrimination, a mistake whose consequences would haunt her forever. And above it all, in the cavernous boardroom, Richard remained seated, motionless as a statue. Amid the ruin enveloping his company, he faced a bitter truth. This was the price Brightwell would pay, far greater than anything he had ever imagined, for the silent complicity, arrogance, and prejudice that he and his fellow leaders had allowed to fester. In the weeks following Brightwell Enterprises' rapid downfall, the tension and panic gradually gave way to a heavy silence. The once iconic symbol of wealth and power now stood empty and hauntingly cold. Its broad glass facades were coated in a thin film of dust, where Rachel's triumphant laughter once rang out, where Jonathan's steely authority was wielded, and where Richard Lawson strode confidently, there was now only an oppressive void. The bankruptcy auction moved almost as swiftly as the collapse itself. Amid cold-eyed investors vying for the remnants of a once great corporation, one woman entered with serene dignity and commanding presence: Olivia Harris. Without fanfare or argument, she placed a single, unbeatable bid, acquiring all of Brightwell Enterprises' assets outright. In an instant, the company Richard Lawson had devoted his life to building passed into Olivia's hands. But her motivation wasn't personal victory. It was justice. She aimed to send a clear message: no one should be judged by appearance or skin color. Just 1 month later, the former Brightwell building rebirthed itself as the Harris Innovation Center. A space once tainted by prejudice and hidden power plays now stood as a beacon for young, diverse tech talent, welcoming ideas from every background, regardless of one's origin or appearance. Inside the center's bright new lobby, Olivia watched with a hopeful smile as eager young faces streamed through the doors. Meanwhile, Rachel Bennett's life had taken a starkly different turn. No longer a powerful receptionist at a major firm, she now worked the night shift in a cramped customer service call center, earning just minimum wage. Every day, Rachel faced hundreds of irate callers, enduring their insults and contempt through the phone line. Each time someone berated her, she heard, in her mind, her own harsh whisper to Olivia: "If you want to pretend you're rich, dress the part." That line now haunted her every night, a constant reminder of the arrogance, selfishness, and prejudice she had once dismissed so lightly. Jonathan Reed, once the unseen power broker at Brightwell, now faced a bleak future of his own. Legal investigations revealed evidence of corporate espionage and illicit information sharing with competitors. He lost everything: his honor, his career, the secret alliances he'd trusted, and the composed, authoritative facade he'd cultivated lay in irreparable ruins. As for Richard Lawson, he quietly retreated to a modest home in the suburbs. Each day brought a fresh battle with the deep remorse he felt. His silence, indecision, and tolerance of prejudice at Brightwell had led to this catastrophe. The failure had not only destroyed the company he loved, but left an emotional wound that would never fully heal. Meanwhile, at the Harris Innovation Center, Olivia strolled among modern workstations where bright young innovators passionately discussed new tech projects. She stopped to speak with each of them, offering encouragement and support. For Olivia, this was more than investment or retribution. It was a responsibility she willingly bore to ensure no one else would endure what she had. Her gaze drifted to the large windows overlooking the street, once the very spot where she'd been shamefully ejected. Those painful memories no longer hurt. Instead, they filled her with a strange sense of peace. She knew that justice had been served, not through anger or words, but through decisive, powerful action. And that justice wasn't solely about punishing the wrongdoers. It was about building a foundation of positive change, fairness, and respect for all. Olivia understood that no matter how painful the past had been, what mattered most was how she used her power to shape a truly different future. Standing in the new heart of the Harris Innovation Center, Olivia smiled softly but resolutely. This was only the first step, but the most crucial one in dismantling deeply rooted prejudice, a powerful testament that justice endures when we have the courage to make it so. 1 year after Brightwell Enterprises' dramatic collapse, the morning sun streamed through the towering glass windows of the Harris Innovation Center, bathing its sleek, vibrant spaces in golden light. Olivia stepped slowly onto the stage, her expression calm, confident, and deeply fulfilled. The auditorium was packed. Young, eager faces of students from diverse backgrounds gazed up at her with genuine admiration and respect. She drew in a steady breath, feeling the new life pulsing through every corner of the building. This was where she'd once suffered her deepest wounds. Now it stood as a symbol of hope and transformation. In a clear, powerful voice, she began. Success isn't defined by what you wear or the color of your skin, but by the respect you earn and the real value you bring. When someone belittles you, don't let anger or frustration derail you. Prove your worth through your actions, your talent, and your perseverance. Every choice carries a consequence, whether it lifts you up or holds you back. Her words weren't just advice. They were the distilled lessons of her own bitter yet invaluable journey. Meanwhile, not far away, Rachel Bennett was finishing her late shift at a cramped customer service call center. Day after day of minimum wage work and irate callers had erased the polished image she once prided herself on. Each angry remark she fielded over the phone reminded her of the fateful moment she'd sneered at Olivia. If you want to pretend you're rich, dress the part. That barb now haunted her every night, a grim reminder of the pride and prejudice she had long taken for granted. Jonathan Reed, the man once revered as Brightwell's hidden power broker, now lived in quiet isolation. Months of legal hearings had stripped him of everything: his reputation, his career, even the secret alliances he'd built. The composed, influential persona he'd cultivated lay in irreparable fragments. And Richard Lawson, Brightwell's former heart and soul, retreated to a modest suburban home, tormented each day by remorse. The respect for human dignity and professional ethics he'd set aside came back to haunt him relentlessly. He understood that the true rot at Brightwell had never been the market. It was the toxic culture he had enabled. Back on the stage, Olivia's gaze swept across the young faces before her. She spoke again, her tone firmer, but still full of compassion. Remember, prejudice and contempt won't disappear on their own. Each of us has both the right and the responsibility to challenge injustice and to build something better. You're here not just to learn, but to prove that talent and self-respect are gifts no one can take away. Silence fell for a breath. Then the room erupted in applause. Inspired and proud, the students cheered as Olivia smiled in gratitude. She knew her story wasn't solely her own. It belonged to every person who'd ever been undervalued, hurt, or overlooked by prejudice. Stepping down from the podium, Olivia looked around one last time. No anger, no sadness, just a radiant smile of deep satisfaction. Her struggle had mattered. It had not only transformed her own life, but had opened doors for thousands of others to find opportunity, fairness, and genuine self-worth. As she exited the hall, the brilliant sunlight illuminated her face, making her smile shine brighter than ever. It was the smile of someone who had overcome every barrier of bias and pain, and emerged stronger. Olivia's final message wasn't just for today's generation. It was a bold affirmation that every action, however small, carries a weight of consequence. Standing in that dazzling light, Olivia knew she had fulfilled her greatest mission, to spark a powerful movement against prejudice and injustice, and to write a new, fairer chapter for countless lives ahead. Olivia Harris's story proves that justice ultimately prevails, and that each person's true value lies in their actions and self-respect, regardless of skin color or background. From a moment of being dismissed, she forged the strength to change not only her own fate, but the futures of many others. What about you? If you were in Olivia's shoes, how would you confront prejudice and injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like, share this video with your friends to spread the positive message, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.